This episode of AU Manufacturing Conversations is sponsored by MYOB Acumatica, enterprise resource planning software designed to help Australian manufacturers streamline operations, boost productivity, and manage everything from finance to supply chain in one flexible solution. And welcome to AU Manufacturing Conversations, Bruce Minty. Good to have you on the program again as a second-time guest. Nice to be speaking to you.
Oh, absolute pleasure to be speaking to you too, Brant. Thanks for having me on board. I really appreciate it.
No worries. For those who didn't listen to the first appearance that you made on this program, you might like to introduce yourself. Others who have perhaps heard your introduction before can skip to the next bit of the timestamp in the show notes, but let's pretend that we've never spoken before and I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Brent. Look, I've been working in the ERP industry now for just over 23 years. I'm working with multiple enterprise level technology providers, some global, some of which are local, such as MYOB, who I work with today. Look, my career has spanned roles primarily within the world of product management and product marketing. But many moons ago, I started out in finance and accounting roles and got some experience there, and then saw the light and migrated towards a career in technology at the start there in solution consulting and then through to business development. But, one aspect that's remained throughout has really been a strong focus on manufacturing here in Australia and a willingness to see it recover and succeed. And I say that deliberately because I guess, where it all started was in my early teens. I'm now 52, Brent, which is a very, very long time ago now when I was a teen. But my family, who were small business owners supplying mechanical components for forklifts, they were working directly with many manufacturers across multiple sub-industries. But sadly for us, what put them out of business were, in fact, the closures in the domestic car manufacturing industry. We first had Ford Geelong in 2016, where, say, 1,200 people lost their jobs across both Broadmeadows and Geelong plants. And then pretty much in the same year, after 80 years of manufacturing in Port Melbourne, the last V6 engine rolled off the production line at Holden's Fisherman's Bend engine factory. And then, of course, we had a little later with Toyota and its Altona plant closing in October 2017, where, more than 2,500 workers lost their jobs. So these were catastrophic developments. And, these brands were my family's biggest customers. And, of course, these events had a wide and significant impact across the supply chain of small to medium enterprises that supported these flagship companies. But in retrospect, rather than marking the end of manufacturing, it more or less marked a transition period where the industry gradually shifted to advanced manufacturing and the growing need for more stringent quality control processes, which is, why we're talking today.
Yeah, nice segue. As you mentioned, today's theme is quality. To get started, I guess a good place would be, why should such quality systems matter? And aren't they just for companies supplying highly regulated sectors such as medical technology and defence?
Indeed. Well, look, quality systems are indeed essential, no matter what industry, really. And robust quality systems are critical for all types of manufacturers, not just those in high-risk sectors, because customer trust and reputation are always on the line and always at risk at a moment's notice. So even if we look at industries like food manufacturing or consumer good manufacturing, electronics and the like, quality issues lead to product recalls. They create potential user harm, and with that, long-term brand damage. So customer expectation is rising across the board, and it's not just in defence or medtech. Increasingly, large clients demand visible, auditable quality controls from all suppliers, regardless of their size. So in the market, especially in the technology sector, we're seeing more demand for tools like supplier portals and blockchain technologies that are employed to provide more visibility across the entire supply chain. So larger clients and retailers specifically, they now demand proof of quality controls. Their traceability and recall readiness are incredibly important, even from their smaller suppliers.
Is there a differing appreciation, or should there be a differing appreciation depending of the stage at a life cycle a company is at? Is it something that matters more when you've reached a certain size, or should it matter right from the get-go?
Yeah, good question. So I guess the way I see it is that you should be building quality in from day one rather than retrofitting quality procedures or trying to interleave quality control points within existing workflows. That said, I'm not saying it can't be done. When you start to introduce quality midway, though, into a process, it does have an impact on flow and throughput because that's the very nature of quality checking and sample testing, right? And so introducing quality later could result in some companies feeling that it's a burden or it's too disruptive. But quality itself and those procedures that support it shouldn't be an afterthought. And for some industries, it must be embedded from the outset. So like food and pharmaceuticals and medical devices, regulatory obligations, things like food safety or TGA compliance, these types of compliance elements apply immediately after business registration. So it means that quality must be prioritized from the very, very beginning. Seemingly small mistakes can escalate as you scale, of course, so becoming more difficult and expensive to fix. So establishing robust quality processes early sets that foundation for sustainable and scalable growth. And there's a few practical ways to embed quality processes early, like developing clear, simple, standard operating procedures and checklists for essential activities, things like order fulfillment, customer onboarding, or when you're handling complaints. So adopt basic quality controls first. So our advice here is to start with simple checks like reviewing the first production batch or double checking outgoing orders. These habits build a bit of discipline and they help reduce risk, of course. And one of the other areas is auditing your suppliers. So prioritize them based on reliability and performance and not just based on price, as it were. So with that, obviously, poor quality inputs compromise your entire value chain, especially in regulated sectors. The other advice here is around investing in digital systems early. So clearly, I have a vested interest in saying this, but implementing systems like ERP early allows you to integrate processes. You can start to automate controls and leverage AI tools and track performance in real time. And ERP helps embed consistency, traceability, whether it be by serial or lot or batch number, and also accountability across operations, making it a lot easier to scale these types of quality checks, whether they be non-conformance or corrective and preventative actions and other procedures that are required as the business grows.
And what are some standards that are relevant to this conversation for people who might not be familiar with quality management?
Well, ISO 9001 is probably the most common and logical starting point, and that's a globally recognized quality management standard that applies across industries. At its core, ISO 9001 ensures that businesses have the systems and processes in place to consistently meet customer and regulatory requirements while driving continuous improvement and efficiency and accountability that goes along with that. So for those unfamiliar with ISO, that stands for International Organization for Standardization, and ISO 9001 sets the benchmark for quality management worldwide. Other common sector-specific standards, things like HACCP, which is the Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Point Standard, which is essential for food safety, and that's widely used across the food manufacturing and handling sectors. You've got ISO 14001, which covers environmental management, ISO 45001, which is specific to occupational health and safety. And then you've also got GMP, which is good manufacturing practice, which is critical in pharmaceuticals, nutraceuticals, and related industries. So many of these standards, especially HACCP and GMP, these are mandatory or strongly expected in a high risk or export-focused sectors like food and healthcare, of course. And with that, we also have a number of emerging and evolving standards for our region. And these are like ESG reporting, which is environmental, social, and governance frameworks that are gaining importance for ethical sourcing and investment and procurement. And then there's FSANZ, which is food standards regulated for Food Standards Australia and New Zealand, and then TGA compliance, which many of us are aware of, which cover business producing or supplying therapeutic goods. And what's important here is that these standards aren't just regulatory obligations, and they're increasingly customer expectations. So large retailers and major suppliers and international clients often require evidence of compliance as a condition of doing business. So companies could be missing out on lucrative contracts by not adhering to these emerging standards as well.
How do standards established and emerging interact with what you do?
Yeah, look, as I mentioned a little earlier, enterprise resource planning platforms like MYOB Acumatica, they play that critical role in embedding quality workflows across an entire operation. So these systems automate compliance tracking. They streamline quality testing and documentation that goes along with that. And they provide real-time visibility of quality and compliance issues within that single integrated platform. So examples are, with automated audit trails and non-compliance alert that means that you stay aligned with standards like ISO 9001, HACCP, and other regulatory frameworks. They also help with operationalizing continuous improvement too. So by linking quality data directly to corrective actions, that makes quality management more proactive rather than reactive and helps fuel those continuous improvement programs. Also, they're minimizing manual admin. It's all about eliminating the need to chase spreadsheets before audits, and that frees up staff so they can focus on higher value tasks. And also, there's the prevalence of real-time dashboards that give owners and production managers that visibility they need into potential quality issues before they start to escalate.
I've spoken to people before and they've been especially busy and maybe a little frazzled because they've been preparing for accreditation for meeting such standards. They've been described before as costly and time-consuming, but of course very necessary and beneficial. How can they be an asset and a driver of growth as well as being kind of onerous to comply with?
Yeah, look, I guess in short, we're focused on kind of making compliance easier for our customers here at MYOB, but by turning quality management into a strategic advantage for them. So it's all about helping businesses, scale sustainably and building that customer confidence by reducing risk without adding onerous complexity. And that said, look, achieving certifications like ISO 9001 clearly requires focus and budget, and it requires businesses to critically examine and document how they operate. And this is, I guess, when you pull that apart, it's where the true value lies, right? And the certification process itself acts as a structured improvement initiative because it helps businesses map out their standardized workflows and responsibilities. It gives them the opportunity to reduce duplication and resolve inconsistencies. It also helps these companies identify waste. It helps them manage bottlenecks and overcome recurring errors that they're dealing with, and then implement targeted improvements as part of meeting compliance requirements. So there's benefit there, and there's also the ability to establish regular checks and review cycles, making issues more visible and easier to address early. And the other one there's around creating clear, consistent documentation and accountability, which obviously enhances employee onboarding and training and day-to-day execution of work. So preparing for an accreditation really forces organizations to tighten operations, to close process gaps, and of course, as I mentioned, embed continuous improvement. And that makes it easier for them to scale, and it also becomes, a powerful differentiator in tenders and negotiations as well. So many larger clients may not require certification, but they'll often favor certified suppliers over uncertified ones, particularly when quality and reliability matter. So as I mentioned earlier, for growing businesses, accreditation can tip the scales in winning major contracts, and they can justify premium pricing, and that increases appeal to potential investors and acquirers as well.
Let's think about a typical food recall where there's been, an ingredient or a process error that's led to a heightened health or allergen risk, perhaps. What learnings can be applied here when it comes to responding?
Yeah, look, when it comes to product recalls, particularly, there are a range of potential negative impacts that could result if the right systems aren't in place. So you've got things like major financial losses, you've got reputational harm, regulatory scrutiny, and a loss of customer trust. So the speed of response is often what determines whether it becomes a reputational crisis or a controlled incident, of course. So effective recall preparedness, including up-to-date plans and supplier traceability, and that enables manufacturers to act quickly and mitigate potential harm, of course. Strong supplier oversight and rigorous processes for confirming accuracy through the supply chain is incredibly important for successful response. Then also transparency and system safeguards. When a recall process is transparent and efficient, it reinforces public confidence in Australia's food safety systems. You could hypothesize that the increase in food recalls we hear about, for example, is partly a reflection of more robust safeguards and regulatory oversight rather than issues caused by substandard stock control or processing. So 3 points to take away here are that prevention, transparency, and rapid responses are vital. And many recalls don't come from bad operators at all. They come from growing and even really well-established businesses who simply are caught off guard.
So, Bruce, could you talk us through practical prevention through supply chain visibility, real-time tracking, and automation to reduce exposure and create audit trails, please?
Sure. Well, look, digitalized supply chains powered by ERP platforms like MYOB Acumatica, they enable that early detection, that rapid response that companies need. So real-time tracking provides that instant visibility across operations. And then that allows businesses to identify defects early and, of course, reduce the financial and reputational impact of recalls or penalties. Automation, when deployed correctly, not only cuts down on human error, but also accelerates corrective actions and generates the data needed to drive continuous improvement, which is very, very important. If a defect's discovered, ERP systems that enable fast, precise traceability, whether by lot or serial number. And these systems show exactly where affected products or batches were sent to, which customers have received them. And that allows you to take targeted action, potentially saving thousands in recall and warranty costs. You can also quickly determine whether the issue originated in-house or with a supplier as well. And that really helps shape both your operational response and external communications. So the role ERP digitization plays is more about building a smarter, safer, more resilient supply chain, not just compliance.
So what are some newer emerging themes in compliance and what's their relevance to listeners, please?
Yeah, it's really interesting ones at the moment. We've got emerging trends in environmental and social governance, ESG as it's known, traceability and cybersecurity. They're reshaping the manufacturing landscape rapidly. The other one is around global harmonisation of standards, and we see that accelerating. And Australian manufacturers really must align with expectations of international clients, including rising demands around ESG reporting and digital traceability throughout technologies like blockchain and QR code tracking. Consumers are now wanting to know the origin of foods they eat, for example. An interesting use case is with a customer of ours who source a rare and expensive type of fish that sells for around $140, $150 a kilo. And they track it from the point of catch in Antarctic waters right through to customers in Asia, Europe, and the Americas. And they do this using a combination of vessel monitoring data, machine learning software, Internet of Things, IoT devices, and, as I mentioned, blockchain technology. So by simply scanning a QR code on the packet of this item, consumers can see which vessel caught this fish, where it was caught, whether it is sustainable to actually catch it from there, where it was processed, and how it was transported. And what this does, this really empowers consumers to make more informed choices about what they eat, really goes to, aligning their consumption decisions with their values too. So that's a really interesting use case of innovative technologies. And another one there's around cybersecurity, which is, as we know, no longer optional in this day and age. It's a core business requirement. And so, as supply chains become more digital and globally interconnected, strong cyber practices are essential for protecting data, also in maintaining uptime of systems and ensuring compliance. So early investment in cybersecurity not only mitigates that risk, but also positions businesses as trusted partners to major clients as well. So data integrity is increasingly under scrutiny. So a single breach can compromise production systems, introduce undetected risks, and ultimately damage customer trust. And at the same time, advanced technologies like artificial intelligence and predictive analytics, they're becoming strategic assets, especially when integrated with ERP tools. These tools can detect anomalies quickly or instantly. They can predict defects. They can optimize maintenance routines, shifting manufacturers away from reactive practices to more proactive quality control processes. And naturally, manufacturers who embrace these shifts will be far better equipped to lead in an increasingly regulated, transparent, and competitive global market.
A nifty place to conclude might be some pointers on kind of a checklist for people to work through who are listening and want a bit of sort of news they can use. What's something of that nature you could provide for proactive improvement?
Yeah, look, there are a number of improvements that you can employ. Conducting regular internal audits is always important. Systems and processes, resources, workflows, everything. Internal audits are a really, really important way to understand where you're at and where you need to be. Obviously, investing in traceability tools, barcodes, RFID technology is important as well, vital for the deployment of blockchain technologies and others and around traceability. Updating documentation to meet current standards is always a requirement. It should be part of your continuous improvement processes. Providing ongoing quality training for all staff too, so as new staff come on board, make it a part of their onboarding process to understand how quality is managed and how sample testing is conducted and non-conformance and preventative actions are managed throughout the business. Obviously, as I mentioned before, I work for MYOB. In integrating robust digital systems like MYOB, Acumatica Manufacturing are important for quality monitoring and reporting as well. Remain prepared for unannounced audits and inspections. So make sure your systems and processes are in place to be able to respond quickly to requests for audits. Review and revise quality KPIs quarterly. Don't let them go stale. So keep them up to date. Make sure they become part of your quarterly review process. And obviously with that, collaboration is very, very important as well. So create a quality feedback loop and ensure that staff out on the factory floor have a say in process improvements as well.
Bruce, it's been a pleasure having you back on AU Manufacturing Conversations. Thanks for again taking the time. Good to catch up.
Likewise, absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you, Grant.
Thank you.